Hello, and this is David Rovix, and we're doing January in History and Song. And if you're out there listening in, and please feel free to join the chat room, say hi, and let me know how it sounds, and anything else, and you feel like saying in the chat room. Nice people in the chat room. Very international. It's a good thing. January 1st, 1836. The Emperor of China once again attempted to ban the addictive drug known as opium from the country. But this pissed off British opium pushers, and within a couple years, China and Britain were at war to devastating effect on China, and it was all about trying to make the Chinese import an addictive drug, which the British Empire was profiting from immensely.
Let me tell you a tale, stir a hornet's nest, well remembered in the East, most forgotten in the West. It was the 1830s, and the Industrial Revolution was turning Europe into a land of wage slaves and air pollution. The history books tell us it was the era of free trade, and the entire world hungered for the products Europe made. Merchants plied their wares across the 7 seas, and they brought back things like porcelain, silk, and tea. Soon all the tea in China could barely keep the West awake. Such a thirst for Chinese products as could barely be slaked. They liked to drink their tea in cups of Chinese porcelain, and those who could afford it loved the silk upon their skin. But what made the merchants and the monarchs scream and cry and shout? They seemed to have little to offer that China could live without. They didn't want their muskets and they didn't want their wool, which left the British coffers empty and the Chinese coffers full. And they called it a trade war. They called it a trade war, and I guess that could be so. They say it's not free trade if it's just a one-way flow, because apparently free trade is when the West comes out ahead. That's how it is in practice, though that's never what is said. The fact of history they'd have sweep under the rug. The one thing they could sell in China was an addictive drug. It had long been banned by Chinese law, but the British didn't care. They packed the opium up in crates and they shipped it there. And they called it a trade war. It all came to a head in 1838. When the soldiers of the emperor torched 20,000 crates. It took 3 days to burn it, and when the fires had gone out, the Chinese people would soon learn what free trade was all about. Navies came from Britain, France, and the USA. In blood, land, and silver they would make the Chinese pay. Cities leveled, thousands killed. The war was 3 years long. That's how they opened China. That's how they got Hong Kong. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war.
And on the 1st of January in 1900, the great Chiune Sugihara was born in Japan. And he would go on to be a diplomat for the Japanese Empire in Manchuria, where he complained about Japanese atrocities against the Chinese people. And he was then reassigned to be the diplomat for Lithuania, which was kind of like a way of saying, piss off. And then in Lithuania, he saw the plight of the Jewish refugees and decided to save the lives of thousands of them.
He was raised in Gifu, on the islands of Japan. He was sent off to Manchuria, that's how this tale began. For his next assignment in the diplomatic corps was far-off Lithuania and the European War. My grandfather was from Krakow. The Nazis came, he fled. He took his family to Vilnius, so they might not end up dead. But the panzers were advancing. He knew they had to go, but he had to have a visa, and all the embassies said no. There was only one final possibility. The last consulate left open, the Third Reich's Asian ally. There in Lithuania, there was no time to lose. They came asking for a visa, thousands of Polish Jews. The diplomat called Tokyo, can I grant them this reprieve? 3 times he got his answer, tell them all to leave. He looked into their eyes, talked to his family. He and his wife decided, we must set these people free. Although I never met him, when all is said and done, I am Sugihara's son. Disobeying orders that they knew to be wrong, Sempo and Yukiko started writing all day long. A month's worth of visas in every 20-hour day. Sempo and Yukiko could turn no refugee away. Word came from the Empire, it's time to turn it in. You're closing down your consulate and moving to Berlin. They knew they did the right thing, of this they had no doubt. They threw visas through the window as their train pulled out. Although I never met him, when all is said and done, I am Sugihara's son. My grandfather crossed Siberia for 5 times the normal cost, fearing for the future with every minute lost. He got the ferry to Kobe, then to occupied Shanghai. There he spent the war years, while back home his people died. Sugihara-san did not seek praise from anyone. When he died, the paper said his neighbors knew not what he'd done. But there are 40,000 people living lives today. Without Sempo Sugihara, I'd not be here now to say. Although I never met him, when all is said and done, I am Sugihara's son.
And then on January 1st, 2002, the euro came into existence in Europe, furthering the project, which is a decidedly mixed bag, I would say, known as the European Union.
I landed in Denmark, headed to my favorite squat, but it was bought by right-wing Christians and was now a parking lot. I went to Christiania to try to find some peace, but the pushers were replaced by an army of police. Went to the Vestas factory to see my buddy Floyd, but they had laid off half the workforce, now he was unemployed. I went to Blågårdsplatz for some espresso and a scone, but then I got arrested for being in a riot zone. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. I spied an ugly building like a prison, if you please. Noticed this was where they now kept the refugees. No more social democratic brotherhood of man. Now it's send back and let them manage if they can. No more protecting draft dodgers who didn't want to go. Now it's send in the Marines and fight the evil foe. Now it's nations run by xenophobes who talk of culture wars. Forget about the Renaissance, it's time to fight the Moors. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. I went to see a friend outside of town, not so far, but the bus line has been cut, now you have to have a car. Where there used to be a farm like a little slice of heaven, now there's a McDonald's and a 7-Eleven. I went to see the doctor, but then I realized the doctor wasn't there and the place was privatized. The poor are going hungry while the rich are growing fat. I don't know quite what happened, but I smell a rat. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. Welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA.
So, somebody was saying that the vocals, my vocals were sounding a little, sort of like making little popping noises, and I turned down the input level, and maybe it sounds better now? I don't know. Let me know. But anyway, moving on January 2nd, 1985, the first Hummer rolled off the assembly line, which I believe happened in Detroit. You know, people have said, when I've mentioned this on like posts on Facebook and stuff, have said, well, what, you know, why is the Hummer so thoroughly vilified? And basically, the reason is because it's a military vehicle. I mean, other than the fact that it's massive, gets terrible gas mileage, shaped like a box. It is a military. It is a civilian version of a military vehicle, and that in itself is just offensive.
Here comes, flying down the center lane, like a cross between a tank and some kind of trackless train. Towering over anything with only four wheels to the pavement, cruising from shore to shore. Radar on the dashboard and the red, white, and blue streams from the antenna and the bumper stickers too. 4 tons of molten metal just to get a cup of coffee. Ready for the battle in whatever suburb it may be. It's another Hummer humming down the highway. See the soldier change his tire, stranded by the road. Maybe that yellow ribbon is some kind of secret code, 'cause the Hummer drives on by with a passing stare, saying, I support the truth, but don't expect me to care. It's another Hummer humming down the highway. miles to the gallon, all the way to the shopping mall. How to say fuck you to the Kyoto Protocol. The only thing it's missing is a machine gun turret, but it still looks to me like a military target. It's another Hummer humming down the highway.
And on, let's see, was it January 6th, 2006, a great man named Hugh Thompson died at a very young age, as happens so often to military veterans who were exposed to all sorts of trauma and all sorts of toxins. And the most notable thing that Hugh Thompson did in his life was to be involved with a military, with an armed standoff with a whole bunch of other fellow American soldiers who were intent on throwing grenades into a hut filled with cowering elderly women and small children.
Hugh Thompson was a pilot, just like many more, fighting for Old Glory on a far-off foreign shore. He was on a lethal mission, only one of many, following his orders to kill the enemy, to kill the enemy. He flew low above the village, searching for the foe. When he saw a wounded child on the path below, he thought this to be a sure sign that the enemy was near. So he radioed for backup and more choppers did appear. More choppers did appear. The wounded, he cried out, and beware of an attack. And then the child died by a bullet through her back. And when he looked around for the culprits of the scene, it was a company of men in U.S. military green. U.S. military green. The dead were in the hundreds, strewn all around in this place called My Lai, which once had been a town. There was a hut of huddled children, soldiers had them in their sights. Hugh decided at that moment to fight for what was right, to fight for what was right. Train your weapons on the GIs, and his copter crews obeyed, and stood among the children, tattered and afraid. The whole town had been murdered, but for some kids and widowed wives, and Hugh Thompson made sure that those remaining would survive, that those remaining would survive. It was a 15-minute standoff in a knee-deep sea of red, amidst the moaning of the dying and the silence of the dead. Hugh Thompson was a soldier, and he served his country well. On the day he saved the lives of a dozen kids in hell, of a dozen kids in hell.
And on January 9th, 2006, members of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society rammed a Japanese whaling vessel, And, of course, they had been ramming and sinking whaling ships around the world. It's not that they just go after the Japanese ones, but the Japanese are the main ones hunting whales, so they're the ones getting followed around by the Sea Shepherd. And is the popping still happening? I tried to change levels and stuff, but I don't know. That's helped.
Time to leave now, from Hobart to Antarctica, so close but so far from Australia, where watchful eyes are always peeled, 'cause you never know when there's a growler below. Watchful eyes peeled for predators and prey, where all you can do is whatever you can to keep the hunt at bay. The time is coming, and it's coming soon, when we'll stand between you and that harpoon. Is unforgiving, the seafloor is a grieve, for those capsized before us fell beneath the waves. Perhaps we'll join them by accident or not, a gale or a storm or a well-aimed shot. But we'll steer around the ice and right into their sights. Everyone must pick their battles. This is our fight. So here beneath the Southern Cross and the crescent moon, we'll stand between you and that harpoon. Between you and the harpoon, there's just a little space, but that's where we can see your face. Look into your eyes, hear you sing. One comes to realize you have to do something. Sometimes all you can do is do your best and hope that someone else will do the rest. So once again we'll spend this afternoon standing between you and that harpoon.
And on January 11th, 2002, the first prisoners of the so-called War on Terror were shipped to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
The conquistadors came with their sabers and guns, and they raped and they slaughtered until they were done. They hacked and they killed and left no one alive. Then they brought in the slaves they allowed to survive. Welcome to the new world, you could hear the men say, as they sat on the shores of Guantanamo Bay. After 400 years, independence was short. That's just how it is with the deep water port. The battleships came and they never left shore. Tasting the conquest, they just wanted more. The sign that said, "Welcome to the US of A." In the Republic of Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. Past the barbed wire in the field of mines, you can see the men who left their families behind to burn neath the sun, to be tortured and killed, where their stomachs are empty and their spirits are grilled. If you're looking for freedom, this is the price you must pay. It's written in blood on Guantanamo Bay. Vultures, they circle at ease overhead. The living may live and the dead will be dead. The time it may come in this tropical heat that they'll have to go somewhere else to eat. Maybe a storm will come wash it away. But still the guard towers glitter on Guantanamo Bay.
And on January 14th, 1981, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC in the United States, removed the ceiling on the number of commercials a commercial radio station could air per hour. And that was one of the many blows against the once thriving independent radio sector in the United States, which was killed off in the 80s under the Reagan administration, and then killed off a lot more under Clinton. I mean, after removing the ceiling for the number of commercials they could air, they also passed bills allowing one person to own, or one corporation to own, up to 40 radio stations, whereas before one person or corporation, I think, could only own one. And then under Clinton, they lifted the ceiling completely on the number of stations one person or corporation could own.
Happened again last night, happens every time I play. When the gig is over, someone has to say a question that appears to be on everybody's brains as they're driving down the highway in the commuter lanes. It sure is not just me, it's the 99% of artists who are wondering about the thousands they just spent on a CD that will never make it to the air. Now all of us are grown-ups here, we know life isn't fair, but the answer to the question is one I'd really like to know. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Perhaps my songs are too cerebral, they don't make you dance. My melodies are boring, there's no spandex in my pants. Maybe it's because I don't use a drum machine. Maybe I'm too red, or maybe I'm too green. Maybe folks just don't want to hear it, they don't want to analyze anything more complex than the space between your thighs. Maybe I should wear more glitter, go to parties in an egg. Perhaps I need to go electric, or show a bit more leg. But it's something I must wonder at the end of every show. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? I'm sure there's an exception to each and every rule, but perhaps I'm too political and not a useful tool to keep the music in the background and the commercials in the fore, to keep the shoppers shopping, not protesting the war, to keep the lemmings humming the same 300 songs, the songs they play throughout the year, each night and all day long. Maybe I just don't make the grade to be one of the chosen few. Perhaps there was a sign somewhere and I just missed the cue, or I need to change my name to Bruce or Silvio. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Could be I just don't have the talent that's involved. I'm lacking the commitment, I'm insufficiently resolved. Or maybe there just aren't a million people who might buy more records made by some whiny left-wing guy. Or maybe they would, but I'm just out of luck, because I don't have a label that can spend $1 million, because Sony and Clear Channel have taken over everything, and you've got to pay the piper if you want to make the piper sing. It's the king who tells the piper where to go. Why don't they play you on the radio?
And on the same date, January... no, where was it? January 14th in 2011, President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali of Tunisia fled the country.
Muhammad had a vegetable stand. This was his family's plight, ever since his father died on a construction site. He was one of 6 siblings. Now this would be his fate, working the streets of the city to put food on everybody's plate. Couldn't afford the bribes, cops would make him pay, so sometimes they'd knock his cart over, get him back that way. Last December they smashed his scales, put him in his place. Then for good measure, cops spat in Muhammad's face. Went to see the governor, maybe there was something he could do. Word came from on high, we don't talk to people like you. Muhammad was easy, and I was living on a wire. Went and bought some paint thinner, and he set himself on fire. Word spread through the region, soon you'd hear it same. Proud and desperate people going up in flames. Sometimes windows open, sometimes the floor it creaks, but no one knew what would happen in only a few weeks when the dictator ran away. When the dictator ran away. Tried to hold a march for the immolated dead. Police met them there with truncheons and bullets to the head. People headed to the Capitol, they would not be deterred. Sometimes this is just what happens to a dream deferred. The police kept up the attack, thousands wounded, hundreds killed. With blood the streets were covered, with gas the air was filled. But the people held their ground, Tunisia's daughters and their sons. One day the cops had had enough, they just put down their guns when the dictator ran away. When the dictator ran away. Now someone had to deal with this rebellious riffraff, so Ben Ali called a meeting of his chiefs of staff. He said these terrorists have decided to go out on the attack. It's time for you, the army, to take our country back. It's time for you, the army, to go and make a stand. Show these terrorists that we are in command. Time to gun these criminals down, that's what he said. Now go. The general got his orders, and the general said no when the dictator ran away. When the dictator ran away. Ben Ali got in a plane, tried to go to France, but he was a hot potato, so he did a little dance. Ended up in fellow warlords shiver from the Tigris to the Nile. All across Arabia, you can hear them talk and sing. Those who dare throw off their shackles would shout, let freedom ring. Where we'll be by next year is for anyone to say. Many will recall where they were on the day when the dictator ran away. When the dictator ran away.
And on January 16th, 2009, the U.S. Treasury Department announced the bailout of Bank of America, giving rise 2 years later to Occupy Wall Street, quite sensibly.
Because this is where they buy the politicians. Because this is where power has its seat. Because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on this street. Because all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%. Because these greedy banksters rob the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. Because the last time that we had a decent government was about 1932. Because we the people are supposed to run this country, but instead it's all run by and for the few. Because now we know the rich do not pay taxes, but when they need a hand it's us who bail them out. Because we suspected we lived in a plutocracy, but suddenly of late there is no doubt. So we're gonna stay right here. Stay right here. Because both my parents lost their savings. Because I have never opened an account. Because the interest on my credit card just doubled, and now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral, that our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live, but I can't afford to drive a car. Because so many of us don't have health insurance. The rest of us have it, but it sucks. Because the rich are flying in their private jets, while the rest of us are slogging through the muck. Because capitalism isn't working. This system has just failed to produce. Because the 1% are prospering, while the rest of us just suffer their abuse. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who had smashed it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square. A young man named Mohammed Bouazizi struck a match that lit up all the earth. And all around the world the spell was broken, and a movement for the future was in birth. Because there's only so much the rich can feed us before we figure out which side we're on. Because we've learned if we want our liberation, it will only the rising of the dawn. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because corporate rule isn't working, and it's time for humans' hearts and minds. Because you can't take it with you. Because the rich just do not care. Because it doesn't matter how much you make, but how much you can share. Because these moments don't come often. Because we want truly to be free. Because we know what really matters. Something called society. So we're gonna stay right here. 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 We're gonna stay right here.
And then, of course, on January 20th, 2009, Barack Obama was inaugurated as President of the United States.
I turned on my TV, though it was hard to see these men who would be head of state. What a great country, from sea to shining sea. We watched the Republicans debate. Newt stood with his third wife and said, "You bet your life the president is a red. He wants to tax the rich a lot, take your limo and your yacht. He wants to have the bankers' heads. And if he gets in again, he'll beat the White House pig, and then he'll hire Chavez as his VP. Then we'll be right on track to give capitalism the sack, along with the insurance industry. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. He'll give everyone food stamps and wheelchair ramps. He'll subsidize windmills and maple syrup. He'll cripple industries with eco-friendly policies, and pretty soon we will be just like Europe. He'll shut down oil wells, give out solar cells to every home in Delaware and Illinois. He'll ban logging in the parks. He'll send the works of Karl Marx to the homes of every American girl and boy. He'll abolish pesticides. He'll be giving out free rides and free lunches too in his high-speed trains. He'll start lots of public works full of union perks. He'll fill all the cities up with bicycle lanes. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. Watch out, his critics tell, this shall be our death knell. He'll pull the troops out and end all of our wars. He'll gut military spending, our empire will be ending, and soon we'll be invaded by the Moors. He'll legalize all drugs, give away beer mugs and hookahs to every child and Korans. He'll ban religions from the schools, give 40 acres and a mule to every person who makes less than 50 grand. He'll close Guantanamo, to torture he'll say no. He'll make us all drive electric cars. He'll reinstate the fairness doctrine, take off that damn flag pin, and he'll put Rupert Murdoch behind bars. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true.
And then just about 1 year to the day after Barack Obama was inaugurated, on January 21st, 2010, the United States Supreme Court ruled officially that corporations are, in fact, people.
A corporation doesn't have to feed a family. A corporation cannot be unemployed. A corporation can't get carpal tunnel syndrome, heart disease, brain tumors, or hemorrhoids. A corporation is set up with one motive, and that is not to judge who's right or fair. A corporation's only goal is making money. That's why a corporation doesn't care. A corporation can never sense the breeze upon its skin, never know what it's like to miss a meal. A corporation doesn't have to worry, because a corporation cannot feel. A corporation can never know the beauty. It cannot wake up in a grove of ancient trees. It only sees $100,000 and some mill jobs it can ship out overseas. A corporation can't care for a child sickened by a toxic oil spill. A corporation only stands to profit from interest on the loan for the hospital bill. A corporation never goes to funerals of any victims who may die along the way. A corporation cannot feel remorse. A corporation never really has to pay. A corporation doesn't have a mouth, but it often has many a mouthpiece. A corporation cannot shoot a gun, but it can employ an army of police. A corporation can never go to prison, no matter how horrible the crime. But a corporation can send lobbyists to Congress to make sure that more of us are doing time. A corporation doesn't feel the pain of a child raised by a TV set, and the corporations will just get bailed out if their clients fall too deeply into debt. Corporations can't be rounded up and shot. A corporation can't be tortured through the night. A corporation can't be blown up by an IED. A corporation cannot even see the sight. A corporation can't be killed by a tsunami. A corporation cannot drown beneath the tide. A corporation doesn't care who wins the war if they can just sell weapons to both sides. A corporation exists only to make money. A corporation never questions why. A corporation doesn't suffer consequences because a corporation doesn't live and doesn't die. A corporation doesn't have to feed a family.
And then here in Portland, in arguably the city in the United States that has the most racist police force in the country, statistically, January 29th, 2010, Aaron Campbell, unarmed black man, shot in the back by police, one of so many killed by police in Portland under the same sorts of circumstances for the crime of being black.
Portland is a town that's in the news much of the time. There are a lot of vegans and there's very little crime. It's a nice, safe place to live. Folks ride bicycles a lot. The winters aren't so cold and the summers aren't so hot. They build houses out of cob. They hang out in the park, where you needn't worry about walking after dark. There are lots of homeless people, but they don't hurt no one. Just be careful of the boys in blue playing with their guns. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 You can hang out with the punks with the piercings and tattoos. You can eat out at a food truck any neighborhood you choose. You can dance to Balkan music while you drink a microbrew, chilling in a gay bar with the mayor and his crew. But be careful what you do, be prepared to get some flack, especially for those who may be male, young, and black. The fact is you do better in Sweet Home, Alabama. You're safer there on the old streets of Birmingham. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 Full of roses, there are flowers everywhere, but for others they've got prisons with some nice electric chairs. You can go downtown, ride the buses there for free, but you never know when you'll get a DWP. A town full of progressives, but such a rotten bunch of cops. Who knows who'll get shot at the next routine traffic stop? When you live in a place like Portland, where they tend to act this way, you can just join the police force instead of the KKK. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 Watch out for the cops.
We are bringing. This is reaching the end of January in history and song, and this is actually going to stay just within an hour, which is kind of what I was aiming for, in case any broadcast like this were ever to appear on an actual community radio station. They like things to be, like that. So thanks for listening. Thanks for joining the chat room, all you people from around the world. I'm going to do one more song and then sign off. And I'll do this again next month for February. And at the end of this month, on January 25th, I'll be in New York City broadcasting the various events at the People's Music Network gathering there, here on Spreaker. So you can tune in for that. 4 p.m. Eastern Time on January 25th. And then I'll do it again at the first Sunday of February. I'll do this show again for February in history and song. And those of you in Ireland, who I don't think include anybody in the chat room there, but I'll be there in 6 days, and so hope to see folks in Ireland at gigs in Dublin, Belfast, Cork, and Waterford, and then New York City after that. And closing this on show on January 30th, 1926, a man named Vasily Arkhipov was born in the Soviet Union, and half a century later he would grow up to save humanity.
The Beach Boys were playing on the radio. The Beatles were singing Love Me Do. Lolita was playing in the cinemas. It was October 1962. Kent Kesey published One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. John Glenn orbited the Earth. Australia had just won the most gold medals at the Commonwealth Games in Perth. The boomers were just getting into high school. Dylan first sang Blowin' in the Wind. The U.S. Army had just started their war against the Viet Minh. On the day Vasily saved the world. If I Had a Hammer was in the Billboard charts, an Air Force jet crashed into the sea. The first black student had been admitted to Ole Miss University. Hewlett-Packard sold a personal computer, but it wouldn't really take off for a while. Jackie had just come back from a trip to India. Plunging necklines were the latest summer style. Algeria had just won her independence. Korea was rebuilding from the war. The Russian River had just flooded a couple of weeks before. On the day Vasily saved the world. The CIA was running Operation Mongoose, killing Cubans in their factories and streets. The U.S. was gearing up for an invasion, still smarting from the Bay of Pigs defeat. The Soviets had sent missiles to Havana to protect themselves and their Cuban friends. The U.S. Navy blockaded Cuba's harbors, and there was no telling how this thing would end. Khrushchev got on TV to make it very clear Cuba was a sovereign state, and if our ships are attacked, we will retaliate. On the day Vasily saved the world. Vice Admiral Vasily Arkhipov was standing at his post on a Soviet Navy submarine. They were on patrol in international waters, one actor in a terrifying scene. They were out of radio contact deep beneath the water when the sub began to shake and crack. The captain said, "Arm the nuclear torpedoes. We're under attack." The Americans were bombing them, but in order to respond, 3 officers had to give the go. 2 were in agreement, but for some reason, the Vice Admiral said no. On the day Vasily saved the world. On the day Vasily saved the world.